One of the guiding principles was to provide the youth and staff with skills to move from a culture of debate to a culture of dialogue. To create some structure, some space that could bring about a better understanding of one another rather than polarizing debate or hidden frustration. A facilitator worked with the youth to support them in asking what she called caring and curious questions. So they spent days learning about one another, trying to step into each other's shoes before diving into the most controversial of topics that plagued each of the regions from where they came. And so the afternoons of interfaith dialogue and activities were full of exciting, heartbreaking, and moving exchange of stories. They were so eager and excited. We all were to learn about the people in religious traditions that seemed on the surface vastly different from their own, from our own. They were enlivened by the common ground that they experienced across traditions, symbols, worldviews, rituals. That was in the afternoons. In the mornings, the youth went to intra-faith groups. So the Jewish youth went together, the Muslim youth, Hindu, Buddhist. My task was to work with the Christian participants for intra-faith programming. So in the group of about 24 youth that I had, there were Roman Catholics, Unitarian Universalists, various kinds of Protestants, Anglicans, AMEs, African Methodist Episcopals, Baptists, Congregationalists, Dutch Reformed, Presbyterians, Mormons, and some emerging atheists, agnostics, and humanists in that group too. It is many years later now. Of course, I do not know how some of those young people will affiliate these days. How did those traditions of their childhood and adolescence continue or not in their journeys? So that motley crew of Christians, right? We explored those topics of war and peace, of gender, of ritual, of forgiveness together. The conversations were not easy. I recall one day when I showed an image of art to begin a session on dialogue. One of the young people said, "That is blasphemous. How could you show this to our group?" Another young person, "What I see is holy." One of their group tasks was to create a service together for upcoming Sunday morning. As they tried to plan that youth-led service, the question became, do we have anything in common? The greatest challenge in that 2-week microcosm, right, was in giving voice and being heard among one's own tradition. These were committed, dedicated youth chosen for their compassion and respect to participate in this experiment. So easy to reach something so different, so hard to come to common ground when it was a little too close for comfort. But of course, when there is space given for dialogue, the conversations, the learning continued, the dialogue deepened as each person sought to add their voice to the choir of a peaceable community. And here is where their unique voices started to emerge. In dialogue with both what seemed foreign and so different, and with what seemed so like-minded at first on the surface. There were lessons learned, as you can surmise, in that experiment that bear repeating again and again in an increasingly diverse and changing religious landscape. Right? We're asked to do the same, to allow our unique voices to emerge within and beyond our religious communities and being open to translation. And ultimately, of course, in a free religious tradition, we're taught to find our voice, to listen to others. So as you may know, I've only been here a couple of weeks here in Michigan, here at Fountain Street Church, and here's what I've noticed in this place, in this community, how we seek to make space for expressing one voice and listening to others. A few weeks ago in Tower Club, the group made a talking stick. Right? That practice of being in a circle, the practice, the tradition of taking turns and listening to each other. In Roses and Thorns in character school, it's been a practice of character school for quite some time, yes? Right? Each child gets a turn to speak or a pass, a chance to be silent. I noticed in Vespers and Fountain Club the quality of presence and trust developed by a safe container where each person has the chance to share. And as I sat among some of the befrienders, I heard, I saw the beauty of people offering to sit with one another, to be present with a patient ear of non-judgment and support. It all sounds so simple, right? Practices that have been done for years, and they are practices that are so valuable because of their ongoing and continued repetition. We live in a very noisy world. A world where just about any voice can be heard if you have access to a platform, which means it gets even harder to hear, even harder to listen, especially to silenced voices. And in a world where voices develop so often in opposition to something, we need always to also discern what it is that we stand for, not only against. And sometimes we don't even know if the voice of another is different or like our own if we keep to the silent agreements between people of what we will not speak of. And of course, one of the great tensions in a human life is when to keep silent, when to speak. On the one hand, in a spiritual journey, we're taught to dwell in silence, to dwell in stillness, and on the other hand, we're compelled to find our voice and to share it. Prophets, philosophers, gurus of the ages have encouraged us again and again to ask a few questions, right, before we speak. They're on to something. Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? Some of us find our voice not through pitch-perfect offering, but through a cracked voice of saying something that might be necessary, trembling lips of something that might be true, or the risk of even saying something kind. Some find their voice in the pause before they speak. Some find voice, that core of self, through friends and family, through children and the generations that come after us. Some find our voice when we're called to advocate for a friend, for a child in need, in struggle. Some of us find our voice when we're called to speak for someone else who is not able. Some find their voice through a vote. Some find voice through silence, right? By keeping quiet long enough to hear another speak. Some of us find our voice, the core of ourself, through the gateway of the mind, some through the heart, others through the work of our hands. Some find voice in the echo of another, from something outside of us. Others, it comes from somewhere deep inside. And of course, some of us find our voice as well through music, or through art, or through song. And as Maya Angelou said, some find their voices not because they have an answer, but because they have a song.
When